Welcome everyone to our webinar today with Steve Stanton. So I'd like to first thank everyone for made the time to attend today's webinar, and most importantly Steve for not only offering to host today's webinar but taking the time to prepare in advance and share his thoughts and ideas without cost. So thanks, Steve. Just before diving into Steve's webinar, we're just going to cover two slides of who Interfacing is for any of you that are attending that aren't aware of who we are. Interfacing has been a pioneer in the BPM field for over 25 years now, developing software, training, and consulting services. We really focus on continuous improvement and transformation programs. We have a global client base, and most importantly, we're recognized by Gartner within 3 reports as a leader under enterprise business process analysis, operational intelligence, and business operating systems, which is actually one of the newest reports that Gartner brought to the market, focused on applications for digital transformation, which is obviously a hot topic in today's world. And our solution, our flagship product, the Enterprise Process Center, is really a suite. It's a process-based solution, but has been extended into governance, risk, and compliance. The base is modeling and management, then analysis and improvement, process performance, and all the way to automation. So really all the concepts that Steve's going to be talking about today, our solution would be a supporting tool for your organization. Some of the challenges that you are facing today, it could be a good solution helping you with your overall program. So that's all that's going to be for me. Like I said, I'll keep it short and sweet. Most important is saving time for Steve to cover all the content that he has for today. Steve has participated in the development of many of the most innovative and valuable business ideas over the past 10 years, such as business reengineering, process management, and smart work. Steve is also well known as the co-author of the New York Times best-selling Reengineering Revolution and the Harvard Business Review article, How Process Organizations Really Work. Steve actually served as a senior faculty at Hammer & Company, and during the following years post Dr. Hammer's death, he continues to deliver Hammer's education, consulting, and research activities under FCB, who are the sole licensee of Hammer & Company's intellectual property. Steve is the managing director of FCB. So welcome, Steve. I'll immediately pass the presentation to you, and for everyone that's attending today, feel free to interject with any questions. We will be launching a couple of polls throughout the session, starting with one right now. As I pass the presentation over to Steve, please go ahead and answer this poll. It should only take 20 seconds.
Welcome, everybody. Sorry, I'm Steve Stanton. I'd like to thank everybody. Good morning to those on the East Coast. Hello to everybody else. We appreciate your taking the time to join us today. I'm going to speak for about a half an hour and leave some time for Q&A or challenges or disagreements or more examples at the end of the material. What I want to talk about today is the dynamic dance of process and technology. For the last 30 years, organizations have been challenged by the evolution in both of those domains. They're deeply intertwined, information technology and process. And today, there's an abundance of new technologies that are offering amazing new opportunities for those of us in the process world, for process practitioners. But too often, many organizations have been timid in using those technologies to create real change. Dr. Hammer would look at many of the redesigns in today's world and say they're not crazy enough. And many of the real advances and the real creation of values for many organizations came from process redesigns that seemed lunatic at first. When Citibank first came up with the idea of dispersing cash in ATMs, there were folks inside the bank who said, that's crazy. We have tellers who do that. When Progressive, many years later, identified the fact that they could serve their customers better by putting adjusters in cars and vans to go to the scene of an automotive accident. People inside of Progressive says that's nuts. That's not the way we've always done things. When Kaiser first identified the opportunity to do both post-surgical consults using telemedicine, there were a lot of folks, including physicians, who said, you can't do that. People need to come into the hospital to see the doctor. And too often, organizations have been timid. We lack the courage to make big change. We're stuck in a pattern of often incremental improvement. And what I want to talk about today is new models to turbocharge organizations, hopefully yours, think about how to create real value for your organization, to deliver real value to your customers by taking courageous steps in terms of process design. And what I want to do is introduce a series of redesign models that will assist you. It shows vividly the change. If you think about where the process world was 20 years ago and where many still are today, it's a focus on tasks, fill an order, answer the phone, complete a maintenance request. If you think about a lot of the language we use in swim lanes, the focus is on activity. It's on tasks. But the world is evolving rapidly away from that. And today, the focus should be on data, getting to a single source of truth. The reality is every dollar that your organization has spent on hardware or software has actually been spent in the pursuit of getting good data, good, actionable, real-time, shareable, accurate data. That's what we don't need, no stinking hardware and software. What we need is good data. That's where our process thinking needs to be today, but tomorrow, where we're going to is a focus not just on data, but on the use of data in decisions. Those mysterious diamonds in our swim lanes are where the action is. And while we've developed quite a complex language to talk about action, we don't have a similar understanding of the anatomy of a decision. So that instead of focusing on filling an order, we can focus on which order to which customer sent at which time. Instead of answering the phone, we can focus on predicting what customers want before they call us. And so this evolution from yesterday to today is all driven by technology as it shapes how we design our processes. What I'd like to do is launch the first poll, which is what are the primary obstacles for you in redesigning your processes. I'd like to see what the audience thinks, and then I'll share what I think is the contemporary problem.
Yeah, the largest feedback is really resistance to change and team misalignment.
Perfect. You know, those are not surprising and very realistic answers. You know, we've been teaching process redesign for 30 years, and far and away the number one obstacle or constraint has been the human part. No organization actually ever failed at process redesign because they couldn't come up with a good idea. They eventually do. It's always the people stuff. And so thank you all for filling that out. But I want to expand it. Those are the answers that we really thought we'd get. But I think there are a couple of other constraints, and it's worth spending a moment on them. I think the first other constraint is how busy everyone is. If you ask somebody today at a lunch or at a cocktail party how they're doing, the likely answer is, I'm busy. Think about how many email messages you guys get. The average worker in North America gets between 120 and 150 emails a day, maybe 3 to 4 hours. Plus, you go to 20 or 30 meetings, most of them unproductive, to put it kindly. So everybody's really busy, and what that does is it deprives us of a critical opportunity, and that's the opportunity to step back and think. The real scarcity for many of us in the process world is time to reflect. Because when we're so busy, what we tend to do is manage symptoms rather than get to root causes. Like the carnival game Whack-A-Mole, where we're hitting all the current problems because everything's urgent. We don't have enough time to really solve things. So that's one of the constraints. Second constraint, and one of the reasons there's so much resistance, is the persistence of strong silos and weak centers. Think about your organization's efforts to create process standards. And if you, like most other organizations, are having trouble, it's because the periphery of organizations is strong and the ability to command consistency from the center of the organization is weak. But that's not all. Perhaps the single biggest problem that gets in our way as process professionals is the clutter of projects. I always ask organizations when I'm talking to them, how many process improvement projects do you got? And the typical answer I get is a lot, too many, or we don't know. And the fact is most organizations have behaved as if resources are free and we can launch as many as we need to. And so most organizations have lots and lots of projects, primarily small projects, small incremental improvement projects that give us better sameness. Certainly improvement, take time and cost out, but at the end of the day, that plethora of small projects gets in the way in terms of staffing and sponsorship and visibility to the larger projects, the ones that seem crazy, that deliver high levels of value, orders of magnitude. And so the curse of better sameness is we are cluttered our organizations with oodles of projects, and it's hard to say no. Most organizations are, perhaps you're like this, fundamentally additive. We do more and more. And the key to succeeding in process redesign is actually to do less and better. Plus, the environment is accelerating. Now, the wicked trifecta is I suspect all of you are experiencing acceleration, novelty, and complexity all at once. And where that leaves a lot of process redesigners is the tyranny of the blank page. You get to do your process redesign, you're anticipating resistance, you're under time constraints, your executive sponsor has ADHD, and so the blank page often moves us to incremental improvements. And what I want to do with the balance of my material is to discuss some innovative ways, some thought starters to turbocharge your efforts, to give you the courage and models to follow on to really dramatically improve your processes. Here are a couple of conventional wisdom principles, but I don't want to spend time here. I want to move on to put some of them in practice by telling you some stories. So I'm going to, the first fork, and I put this page in for historical purposes, but the first question process redesigners need to ask in today's world is not how do we redesign, but do we automate or augment the tasks within this process? There's ample material out there in the public domain about when it's appropriate to automate. The real issue is when we don't automate a task, the only other choice is to really augment. And by that, I mean augment the employees, the workers. One of the greatest crimes for most large organizations that I've seen in the last 10 years is the gutting of the training budget, the training and education budget. If we're really going to keep humans doing work, what we have to do is improve the investment in the skills and capabilities of the folks who do those processes. And so the first fork is not just automate or not automate. The first fork for process redesigners to think about is automate or augment. And that takes us to the set of patterns that I want to talk about. The next process design patterns is the list of the 9 basic models that we see organizations going through. But rather than keep that in an abstract, let's go to the first page that says hybridize. How many of you are struggling with instituting standards, process standards, consistency? It's easy to see the benefits of process consistency in terms of maintenance, in terms of moving people around, but it's hard to implement. And many organizations have actually looked at standardization as a yes or no, all or nothing issue. But the really interesting models are actually ones of hybrid standardization. This is the page we think about standards. So I was talking about hybrid standards, which sounds like a contradiction in terms. But let me give you an example. How many of you have used Uber? Is Uber consistent around the globe, or does it vary? And the answer is yes. They have a consistent back end that's common around the globe. You only have to input your credit card and your identity once, but what you see on your screen varies by city, by location, and I'm not just talking about the streets. For example, in Buenos Aires, you can call a helicopter by Uber. You can't do that in Boston. In Mexico City, you can call a cargo truck on Uber. Again, you can't do that in Boston. So is Uber standardized or diversified? The answer is they found a way to do both. And that's what's interesting. Many organizations have been paralyzed. The U.S. military has been struggling, the Defense Department in their logistics area, with the fact that you want to talk about strong silos. They have 4 different service areas, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, and 4 different command centers geographically. And everybody wants to do their own thing because, here's a phrase you may have heard before, we're different. And so what Uber has been able to do is find a way to mix consistency and standardization. Darden has done the same thing in salt. Darden owns a number of restaurant chains, including Olive Garden, and they had huge ideological battles over salt. They used salt both in the kitchen and on the table. The cook said we need different salts in the kitchen. Darden said you can have different salt in the kitchen for each chain, but we're going to buy the same table salt to put on the tables where guests eat across all of our restaurants. Again, hybrid solution. So that's one of the models. When you're looking at consistency, find a way to get the best of both worlds. You want to talk about fast? Let me tell you about Zara. Some of you may have know about Zara, the Spanish clothing company owned by Inditex. I believe the owner, the primary shareholder of Inditex, is now the #1 wealthiest person on earth. And Zara is their flagship line. And Zara has exploded the clothing industry because they can get clothes on the market in 10 days, whereas the Gap or many other clothing stores have an 18-month cycle from design to receipt on a retail shelf. And what those 10 days have allowed Zara to do is be close to the market. Because every day the store managers at Zara get on the phone in a series of conference calls and they say, here's what the market's telling us. Let's say there's a video of some female singer on MTV wearing a purple blouse. The next day, a lot of women, young women, go into the stores looking for purple blouses. That night, the store managers hear a demand, and that evening, the design is created for purple blouses. The next day, it's cut and sewn. 2 days later, it's on airplanes, and it's in the store while the video is still in play. 10 days, because they're close to the market. So think about, in your organization, how far are you from the market? How much time in your process design is spent in rework? When you have a low ratio of value time, VT over ET, value time over elapsed time, you have an opportunity to turbocharge it. Now, Zara didn't start out by saying, how can we take 10% out of the cycle time of our production? Their goal from the beginning was to take 95% of the time out. That's what acceleration means. If they had started out saying, how do we take 10% out, they would have niggled around the edges. But when they had a profoundly aggressive and ambitious goal, it forced them to rethink their model. And now they've got a set of adjoining processes where the work flows immediately from market receipt to the design process, to the production planning process, to the production and shipping processes. All of them have interfaces that are instantaneous with each other. It feels like one extended macro process, and that's what acceleration gets you. So that's another model for you on the call to be thinking about. Let's do the next one, customize. And, you know, I've talked about a number of organizations that do things differently. Have any of you see what Mars is doing with M&Ms right now? You want to talk about customization? Now, this is product customization for the moment, but you can put your photo on an M&M. You can create a new color or a new design or a happy birthday or congratulations on your wedding message on any kind of M&M. That's customization. In terms of process, many of us are stuck with the implicit assumption that we have to treat all work the same. When IBM Credit was redesigning their credit approval process, they realized that they had treated every credit request the same way, whether it was from a pre-existing customer with an outstanding credit history or a new customer with a large order. And what they did is they created 3 different process versions to allow them to treat different orders differently. They were able to triage them. And many of us fall into the trap of what I think of as false democracy. It's treat all of our orders the same, all of our calls the same. If you call American Express, the first thing they ask you is to put in your account number, and what that actually does is not just summon up your account history, but it actually identifies which customer service rep you get. The more attractive a customer you are, the more skilled customer service rep you get. And so they can treat different calls differently. That's what we mean by customization. One of the biggest trends we see is cross-functional teams. People who used to be throwing knives and books at each other, now working together harmoniously in teams. Liberty Mutual, an insurance company that sells property casualty and workers' comp policies, used to have a never-ending tension between their salespeople who wanted to sign up any account that they could, and their adjusters and risk managers who would say, no, 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 that business is too risky. We can't insure them. And so there was a never-ending ping-pong game where the salespeople were promoting a particular company and the risk managers were saying no. How did they solve it? Liberty Mutual created a cross-functional team organized by geography so that the salespeople and the risk managers had to work together. And only when they both aligned could a new account be added. That's integration. Putting cross-functional teams together. So instead of a series of handoffs, when Hallmark Cards encountered a problem when it was taking them 18 months to take a greeting card from concept to market, what they realized was that each card had to go through 40 departments, which meant they had 39 handoffs. Of course, it was slow. So what did they do? They reorganized a lot of their people into cross-functional teams. They have a large Thanksgiving Day team, a very small Mother-in-Law's Day team, and on each team are artists, writers, marketing, production people, working together, focused on a common product. Problems that used to be discovered 6 months later because of the delays in handoffs now get surfaced very quickly. That's what we mean by integration. Another important pattern. So when you see lots of rework, when your current process diagnosis indicates a prevalence of handoffs, creating cross-functional teams is a very powerful way to both not just accelerate the outcome of the process, but to create high levels of value. We're going to take a couple more and then I'll stop. I want to do obliterate because this is really about obliterating boundaries. And, you know, we're surrounded by lots of powerful examples. For example, we're all used to ATMs, but it wasn't so long ago that we used to have to go into a bank to get cash. Go to the supermarket. Instead of having clerks bag our groceries, we bag them ourselves. We fill our own gas. These are all examples of where work has moved across organizational boundaries. But there are some more profound examples. Warby Parker is one, the online eyeglass company. Most of the eyeglass organizations, retail entities that you see are actually part of one large monopoly located in Italy, and that's why eyeglasses cost so much. But Warby Parker, you can now go online, take an eye exam, have your eyes measured, take a photo, superimpose eyeglasses on your face, and do the entire work of purchasing eyeglasses online. Instead of going to an ophthalmologist, an optician, and a retail location, the work is flown, and we take our own eye exam. We use their software to measure the distance between our eyes to make sure that the eyeglasses fit correctly. And instead of eyeglasses costing $600, $700, as they do in most retailers, at Warby Parker, you can get a pair of bifocals for $200, $225. That's obliterating boundaries. That's one of the most powerful moves that your organization can take. Move work to your customers or to your suppliers. Just because that's the way we've always done it doesn't mean that you need to do it. And so when there are discrepancies in scale, or someone can do a particular task better than you can, or there are low switching costs, moving work to other organizations is actually one of the most powerful moves. And given the time, I'm going to move a couple of pages ahead to pattern 9, informate. I want to begin wrapping up to see what you guys think of what I've said and to see if you have any questions. Because this is without question the single most powerful move you as a process professional can do, and that's to add data to your process in a new and innovative way. So I mentioned Progressive earlier, but let me talk about another thing that Progressive has done, and perhaps you've seen it, or maybe you're a customer, and that is Snapshot. Snapshot is a device that Progressive will have you put in your car that will monitor your driving patterns, 31 different driving sources of data. And if the Progressive analyzes that data and deems you to be a safe driver, you get a lower premium. Now, in the past, the way insurance companies like Progressive would have priced their premiums would be based on averages. On a driver like you, living on a street like you, driving a car like yours at your age, with your particular driving pattern, they would calculate the probability of an accident and then based on the averages and then price your premium. But what Snapshot does is it allows Progressive to go from averages to actuals. And that's scary. Because it's not people like you's driving pattern that creates your price, it's yours. And so if they find that you're driving really fast at 2 a.m. on a Saturday night, that has a direct impact on your premium price. Using data, real-time data, is astounding. One of the reasons GE has changed their focus from an industrial company to a software company and an Internet of Things is because they are now using real data. In the past, GE, like many organizations, went for long product life cycles, long-time products that would stay stable in the market. But now using Predix, what they've done is they've redefined their product development process to produce minimally viable products, because let's say, talk about things that spin. And they can create fans and put them out in the market that cool engines, and the fans are studded with sensors. And what those sensors do is they pick up data, heat, pressure, duration, potential of damage data, and they send that back to the customer and to GE. And GE is already using that data to create the next model, version 2 of the product. That's using data in real time to do product improvement, as well as using data as another element that you can sell to your customers. You're not just selling a fan, you're selling data about the fan so that you can do far better maintenance and extend the life of the product.
It's really interesting, the patterns. We definitely have some extra time, so if you do want to roll back to any of the other ones, I think it's extremely interesting, and I think everyone's learning a lot.
Okay, well, I'm happy to do that. So because increasingly we've got data, we can think about doing things differently. Shell Oil, at every one of their refineries, has a process I had never seen anywhere before. Not just a better process, a different process, and it's called CAP, Causal Analysis Process. Anytime anything happens at one of their refineries, which are big and expensive and full of flammable materials, anytime anything happens that isn't expected, that's out of the ordinary, they convene a CAPA process to understand why it happened and how to keep it from happening again. And they have a couple of different versions. If it's a small anomaly, they have a small process, takes a week or so. But if it's a major thing that was unexpected, they extend that. That's a way to create more contemplation and to make sure bad things don't happen. There's a major wine company that used some interesting thinking to change the sequence of some of their tasks. They've asked me not to give their name, but in the past, this is an Australian white wine organization, used to grow the grapes, make the wine, bottle the wine, ship the wine to the United States, and then sell it. What they realized was shipping glass is A, expensive because it's heavy, B, risky because glass breaks. So what they did was they decided to grow the grape, make the wine, put it in huge balloons, essentially, 2,000-pound balloons, ship the balloons, and then over here in the US, bottle it and then sell. What do you think happened at that wine company when somebody first said, you know, instead of shipping glass, we should be shipping our wine in balloons? You can bet somebody said you're crazy. But it turns out that it dramatically lowered their shipping costs and their breakage. That's a real process innovation, using the time to think differently. We often make decisions, process decisions, in the absence of data. Why not redesign our process to make sure that our decisions arrive with the provision of data? Hewlett-Packard did that. They used to have a tremendous inventory problem because they sell their printers worldwide. But A, the manuals needed to be in multiple languages, and B, the electrical prongs needed to be in multiple configurations because there's no global standard. And then they'd have the inventory problem of matching languages and prongs, creating infinite numbers of SKUs. So they came upon a simple solution by rethinking the order of things. Now they pack their common printers, but leave the box open. And as they get orders, the provision of data, rather than guessing, they then put in the correct manual, given the language of the destination, and the correct electrical endpoint. Cut their inventory by 60% because they changed the sequence of work. They now make decisions with data instead of advancing it. How many of your organizations forecast sales? What's a synonym for forecasting? Guessing. It's an old joke. Why do forecasters use decimal points? And the answer is to prove that they have a sense of humor. So at least one large chemical company now doesn't ask its customers to forecast sales. What do? They ask them to predict their sales, and if they're accurate, they provide them a discount. So instead, they are now incenting their customers to give them accurate data, which allows them to do their long-range production scheduling. The key is to increasingly sense what's going on. In today's world, talking about technology, everything that moves emits data, and every action creates data that's seeable if our processes have enough sensory capabilities to take in that data, validate it, analyze it, and share it. Too many of our processes, because we've been historically task-focused, aren't focused on taking in data, validating it, and using it. And that's the big revolution right now. Increasingly understanding that it's a data-driven world. We're running out of words to describe the quantities of data that's available right now. There's never been such an environment that's so data-rich. And so as we come to a close, the real issue is how do you make your processes smarter so that they can sense and use the data that's available and then make decisions based on it. And have to recognize that the world has changed. It's no longer a world of tasks. Of course, there's still activity and we have to understand it, but that's not where the opportunity is. The opportunity is in using data, finding more ways to perceive data, and data is coming in more formats. So it's not traditional structured data. It's data from social media, it's data from photos, increasing our ability to use all of that data and then stepping back and thinking more. The crisis of busyness has made it very hard for us in the process world to actually stop, take a deep breath, and think about what are we really trying to get done. Avoiding the trap of just putting Band-Aids on problems, avoiding the trap of dealing with symptoms. The key to success in the future is finding time to do deeper thinking, to reflect more. Because that's going to allow us to take advantage of all this technology. We can have talked for hours about the innovations created by social, by sensors, by big data, by cloud, by the ability to rapidly create new software through Agile. The world has never seen an environment filled with as much astounding available technology as it is today. We in the process world have to put together the equation of technology, process to create value for customers. And if we do that, we'll be successful for ourselves and for our organizations. And with that, Scott, let's see if we have any questions.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Very insightful. I personally really enjoyed the topic, taking a completely different approach in terms of process improvement, looking at things of where we are today and what is process improvement today versus where it was 20 years ago. I think it's extremely insightful. In terms of what you're talking about in terms of the integrate pattern, I actually see that applicability immensely within the development world, where I actually believe in that's the future of Agile. So Agile used to be bringing all the departments together, but you still had product, QA, development working in those silos with handoffs. So now the future in terms of Agile is micro teams. So each module or function has a product owner, a QA, and developers assigned to it, working as their own micro teams and then integrating with the other teams.
Let me tell you a quick story about that. You're absolutely right. And when Google was really migrating towards Agile, they're having problems with these micro teams because people weren't used to coders and testers working together. They're used to throwing things over the wall. And so they needed to think hard about where do people work hard well together under pressure. And what they realized is NASCAR pit crew teams were a perfect example of people working together. And so Google did a series of best practice visits to NASCAR pit crew teams. Because you know how long it takes to change the tires at a pit stop on a NASCAR race? 7.2 seconds.
Right.
And so Google and NASCAR are two entities that you don't always think about together in a single sentence. But they were doing exactly what you're talking about, learning how to make these functional enemies work together as an integrated team. That's the only way to make Agile work.
Well, I have a question here that came from one of your earlier slides about the world today and how emails used to be productive, and now it's become more of a unproductive activity because of the spam, the mass mails, the amount of mails, what we call email overload. What do you recommend in terms of improvement or solutions to this problem in today's world?
That's a great question, and that's a tough one. I think it's astoundingly stupid that most organizations are allowing their employees to be besieged by 150 emails a day at the cost of 3 to 4 hours. Part of the problem is email in most organizations is an orphan. I bet none of your organizations listening here today have a vice president of email. It doesn't quite fit, you know, the security part sort of fits in IT, but it doesn't quite fit anywhere. And so if you really want to get your handle on it, some organizations are. I know of one large alternative energy company that has a policy that after 90 days, all emails disappear, no matter what platform they're on. Many of the world-class leading consultancies have email-free Fridays. But the key is actually two-pronged. Schneider, the electric company, has done something brilliant. They have created a very, very vibrant intranet. Because a lot of the emails that go out, at least not the junk stuff, are requests for information. And so they've been using their internal intranet. They have about 150,000 employees, 110,000 are on their social media, organized around 1,200 different topic areas, and that's where a lot of the email has migrated to. And so that's one tactic, is to create an alternative communication mechanism that's focused on information sharing. But the most powerful stuff is the hardest, and that's the creation of email policies. Think about what life would be like in your organization if distribution lists were kept at 10 or under. If your email system automatically prioritized single sender or single receipt emails, it would keep a lot of the junk off. But as long as it's unowned, I mean, you have to think, why do organizations allow this massive unproductivity? Because no one owns it. And we all believe that time is free. And the fact is, we have a finite amount of time to get work done. And the less time we spend on junk, the more time we can spend doing real work and thinking work. And so it's a tough answer, and I hope it's not too long, but your organization needs to create some policies to migrate the questions to a more appropriate media and to begin to create some policies. Because if not, it's chaotic. It's an unmanaged phenomena that's imposed on employees. Good luck with that one, but it was a great question. Thank you.
I have another one here that I know we get hit with quite often, and especially now that you've brought up all these new patterns in terms of process improvement, is how do they change their C-levels' minds? How do they sell this program? At the end of the day, the ROI, they're always requested, what is the ROI? How can they approach this, put it into numbers in terms of the cost and in terms of the value?
Well, you know, it's interesting the way you phrase it. How do you sell it at the end of the day? And I think you sell every day. Earlier, we asked people what the number one obstacle was, and the answer, and I suspect it is a significant amount, was resistance. And the number one reason I think process redesign teams fail is they don't spend enough resource on change management. They think it's something corporate communications can do, or something we do during implementation, or it's a sideline activity. You want a real battle-scarred level of resource expenditure. I think half of redesign's team, time and energy needs to be spent on stakeholder management. By stakeholder management, I mean that every single stakeholder that's impacted or has power over a process redesign, you need a strategy for. And in some cases, those strategies are to get the ROI for the project. In other cases, is to find people whose view of the future aligns with the teams and get their support. And so I think that right from the start, process redesign teams need to create a very well-crafted set of stakeholders to identify exactly what they want from them and how they're going to get it. And if they need a powerful C-level executive needs an ROI, and by the way, that should only, C-level exec should only be as involved if it's a really big project, then you should start doing an ROI, but you do it based on understanding what they're looking for. Is it over the hurdle rate? Does it have to be astounding? Is the ROI a substitute or surrogate? You know, maybe it's a type of project your organization hasn't done and your exec doesn't have the confidence in investment. The ROI won't convince somebody whose stomach is upset to invest, but maybe a best practice visit to somebody who's done a project like that and provide what you need. And so ROIs are not always just about numbers. Often they're surrogates for other issues. sometimes they're a surrogate for, I don't want to do it. And so you can do a well-developed business case and somebody will pick at your numbers. It's not because your numbers are wrong, it's because that's another form of resistance. But you have to realize, we in the process world are making change. And organizations, like any form of entropy, resist change. And so we have to be all the time selling and managing the organization around that change with at least half of our time. And, you know, really good redesign always operates on two tracks. There's the analytical, intellectual, data-driven redesign, the actual architectural purity of a new way of working, and then there's the people track. And the pitfall for many organizations is over-focusing on the kind of left-brain analytic work and under-investing in the softer stuff. And the key, as I suggested, is to make the soft stuff hard, disciplined, and data-driven. Change management isn't wussy, it isn't soft, it's disciplined. Identifying key stakeholders, figuring out what they want, and figuring out how we can get them to give us what we want. And that's what I think about in terms of selling. Another great question.
Beyond questions, what's nice is some people are chiming in with their own 2 cents in terms of adding on these questions, such as Tanya, who mentioned we measure so many data points across all areas of people work, but email. Companies need to ask with this is, what is the ROI of the email you do? So I agree. How can we actually monitor this type of information and put performance metrics against it? So it's an interesting tidbit. And I also see here Shantanu also added why companies still today haven't learned their lesson against jumping into technologies. Meaning it's not that technology isn't the solution, it's that companies aren't reflecting more on the process innovation as some of these patterns that you mentioned, where they should be putting their effort in terms of accelerate, contemplate, informate, but they jump right into, you know, robotics or going a new ERP, or before they actually know what they're getting into or why they're getting into it.
Show me an ERP implementation led by IT, I'll show you a failure. They have to play. They have to play, and it's critical. But it's got to be a process project supported by IT.
So I just want to give you some time, Steve, since you did take all the time to prepare and give you a bit of marketability. I've pulled up your slide on some of your upcoming FCB classes that you will be offering in the Boston area. Maybe you just want to talk to them a bit. What are the different courses that you're offering?
Great. Thank you, Scott. I'll be brief. Process redesign is a course that is designed for process improvement teams. It traces the entire trajectory of a process redesign project from initiation through mobilization, diagnosis, process redesign, and implementation. We've been delivering this course for 15, 20 years. Very powerful, especially for teams. Power Process is more organizational focused. And it's about how do you get your organization to be more focused on processes? How do you get more high-level process support? How do you get more process management embedded in your organization? Leading transformation is about how do you create big change? What kind of change management and sponsorship is necessary? And implementation and execution is around critical latter parts of the project, because truthfully, I bet many of you on the webinar have experienced the fact that when the design team is done and they deliver a new process and a new system to a user organization, immediately after the design team leaves, the process goes through organ rejection and people go back to the old way of working. It's very sad and it's not uncommon. And so this particular project is about how do you actually not just implement the project and hit your time and resource milestones, but how do you make it stick so that the new way of working is embraced by the folks who have to execute it, not just the process team who delivered it. And those are the kind of courses we offer. Please go to our website at scbpartners.com. By the way, the SCB is in honor of Dr. Hammer. His last book was Faster, Cheaper, Better. And so we identified that as an appropriate way to honor him. And if you go to the last page, Scott, there's my email address. Steve, actually, it's not. Steve at stevestanton.com or sstanton@fcbpartners.com. If you want to get in touch with me, give me feedback about the webinar. Thank you, Scott and Interfacing, for hosting me. Thanks, everybody who's still on the line, for your patience in listening.
So, as for everyone, there will be a short form that if you can fill it out when you sign out, it'd be much appreciated to get some feedback on this this presentation given by Steve. And I want to thank Steve once again for taking the time to prepare and for giving us his time today. And this is a webinar series, so everyone that is on today's session, note that every month we will be having another industry expert, such as Steve, within the all focused around process as well as overall in terms of enterprise management as well. We'll extend it a bit into GRC and tech and some other topics as we go through month to month. So feel free to go to our website to sign up for some of those other webinars. So for everyone who's been asking, yes, you will get access to the slides. We will be sending out for everyone who did attend today's session access to today's video if you do want to share it with anyone else, as well as access to the direct slides if you want to go through them and read them in a bit more detail, especially those patterns that we skipped over today. So thanks everyone for attending. Thank you, Steve. Pleasure.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.